Hello everyone, thank you for joining another PlayUK Salon, a series of talks with creatives and game dev professionals from across the UK. Tonight we're talking about VR and all the challenges and possibilities it brings and the impact 2020 had on the reception and demand for social VR. And who can better explain that than Simon Barratt, the co-founder of CoopInnovations, an immersive studio developing social VR, AR technologies, experiences, games, and applications. So Simon, thank you for being with us tonight. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cool. It's really great to have you. So let's dig straight in, since we're all eager to hear more about these immersive technologies and the future of entertainment. So, and also a small heads up for our audiences. Simon will be so feel free to ask all your questions in the Q&A box, since Simon will be answering all of your questions as soon as possible. So yeah, Simon, so let's dig in. Let's talk about VR, how you got into it and how do you do it and what you actually do.
Awesome, thank you very much. Just gonna make sure my slides are moving. Yeah, that's all fine. Cool, hi everyone. It's very weird not being able to see the audience when speaking, so if you have questions or anything else, as was said, please just jump in. So I'm Simon Barratt, I'm CEO and co-founder of Cooperative Innovations. I've been in the games industry for 22 years now, originally as a programmer, and I still try to get some time to program when I can, but nowadays tend to wear a mix of business hats, kind of design, production, and kind of all the things, juggling lots of plates and spinning them too. So we've worked on a huge amount of titles in that time, many genres, and Cooperative Innovations was set up very much around multi-user experiences and bringing people together. And despite all of the time I've had in the industry, we've done a lot of interesting projects in the past, including augmented reality in 2012-13 with Sony and their PlayStation Vita. But this Spaceteam VR was the first VR title we've released. So as I mentioned, so Co-op, we're an immersive technology and content studio. We ultimately developed the technology which drives all of our experiences, whether it's apps for enterprise or games for experiences. And the technology is built on top of Unreal Engine, so we build our own plugins, which other people also license from us as well at certain times. We believe that people are the multiplier to any experience that you can have. It's obviously true in real life as well, but obviously right now people are craving experiences with other people, and the technology and skills and design work and programming to sort of enable those multi-user experiences is not super simple. So we've dedicated ourselves the last 6 years to enabling those things to be had. So whether that's shouting at each other in Spaceteam or doing a sort of multi-user cooperative evaluation in an enterprise setting or business setting, that's the kind of thing we like to be able to enable for companies and for people. So as well as that, we also work with other creators, as I said, licensing our technology, but also sharing things we've found in the various prototypes and projects we've built over the years. And we work across a wide range of industries, as well as games. And I'll mention at the end a new project we announced, which is around the heritage, arts and culture industry. So just a quick picture of some of our team. So we've actually got about another 6 or 7 people working with us right now, and yeah, always looking to grow the team further. This is a sort of good shot which just shows a few of the clips, which we'll get into in a minute. So in the top left we have Raiders of Verda, one of our original titles, which is still being slowly developed. Top right we've got some of our technology, which is the basis of a lot of our social VR tech. Bottom left is an interesting research project we did using some of the similar technology, but with real life human tracking, kind of a motion capture solution. And bottom right is a social VR hangout we kind of created as an R&D project, again, for like 3 or 4 years ago now. And I think a lot of us would like to be hanging out in a virtual pub with each other. Oh, sorry, skipped ahead. There we go.
Oh, okay, Simon, so before we dig into more details about the project that you are working on, can we take a little step back and talk about what actually got you into VR? You've been in the games industry for so long. So what like made you what made you like decide to start your to start your own studio together, and how was it actually like gathering people around this like new technology and bringing them on board?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I guess first in terms of games development, I was very young when I got my first computer, 6 years old, and fascinated by games and the fact that I could type in code myself to be able to create them. And so my mum taught me to program some very basic sort of programming languages, and I kind of bought books with all my pocket money, and kind of self-taught from there in terms of learning assembly. And then when I was kind of 10 or 11, C++ and C at the time. Very lucky to get onto the internet really early as well, and so I was able to learn from bulletin boards before it was the internet, and then obviously news groups and chat systems and everything else, IRC. So yeah, really lucky and well placed in terms of the timing to be able to learn that stuff. And that actually VR was a big sort of factor in books I was reading at the time. So not just fiction, but also how to build your own virtual reality headsets, kind of DIY. So I had an interest in electronics as well, which I guess is kind of how Palmer Luckey came to create Oculus, was that kind of messing with hardware and trying to build own headsets as well. So I'd actually bought a very early VR headset in the early 90s, made by a company called Eyeglasses, and actually had two of those. They were worth about $2,000 each, but I found them for sale for like £50 at a car boot sale, and managed to buy them and fix them. And just trying the head tracking on that, even though it was very simple wireframe, really basic graphics, was still a really interesting way to try out what the potential of VR could be. And I think being a big fan of multi-user experiences like early EverQuest and stuff was in like the late 90s, trying multi-user experiences and games like that, plus combining it with the love of VR. You sort of saw this future sort of metaverse we're heading towards was always on the cards. It was just a matter of when, not if. And I think that's what started the passion. And obviously I went into the games industry, built a lot of other studio stuff, different games at my own studio, grew the team there and brought a lot of people on board, built a lot of technology. And I guess all of it kind of culminated into where we're at with Cooperative Innovations today. Oops, sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you, Simon. Yeah, and regarding the profiles at your studio, like so the CoopInnovations consists of like mostly programmers. Who else is at the studio? Animators, game designers, artists.
So we've got a broad mix, and I would say that like any games company, so we'll have the programming team, so they'll tend to be implementing features which are required by the designers, and also tools for the artists as well in terms of putting things together. We tend to be more programmer heavy. My co-founder and I are both obviously senior programmers and built a lot of this technology before. And my old studio, we had our own 14 platform game engine we developed, so we didn't use Unity or Unreal. We developed from scratch our own system, which would run across all platforms. So that knowledge of building that level of technologies kind of put us in good stead for using Unreal, because we really do understand what's going on under the hood. We wouldn't try to compete and build all of those systems now, but we were able to go into that kind of black box, as some people might perceive it, and actually fix issues and make it bend to what we need it to do, which is an advantage we have. So yeah, I think heavily reliant on programming, but obviously design and art are obviously key parts of it as well. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Let's then continue like with the project that you have been working on at the studio.
Awesome. So this is Raiders of Erda, and so this is a multi-user. Sorry, I'm getting sound. Are you hearing sound as well, or is that okay for you?
We are actually no.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, cool.
Only hearing you.
That's fine. I'll just try and ignore the voices I'm hearing in my head, as usual. So this is a multi-user dungeon crawler. So obviously all fans of role-playing games, but the ability in this to actually take it in VR and actually pull the bow and arrow and hold the sword and shield, and also be waving and dancing as you're moving around the dungeon with people. So this was the first title that we sort of really wanted to make, because we played a lot of single user dungeon games, and various awesome dungeon crawlers and things were being built for VR, but we felt that doing it together as a team and collaborating in terms of tactics and everything else would be a lot of fun. And so we spent a few years working on this alongside the technologies to drive it, and it's still something we want to come back to at a later point.
Cool. And how big was the is the team actually working on this game?
So actually, Raiders of Urda was developed with four of us. I mean, I was mainly doing business development and fundraising for the team at that point, so I didn't do a huge amount on it other than some high-level design work. It was primarily built by my co-founder Brian Fran, one of our designers, and then we brought in some artwork and animated it with Chris, our animator. So yeah, it was a really small team when we first got started that built. To be honest, it was pretty much built all of that. We had another artist work with us for a little bit on some of the environment, but primarily that was built with a small team. And I think now, as I say, we're kind of around 18, 19 people at the moment, with a couple of freelancers in there. But yeah, it's a nice mix to have.
Was this your first VR game that you developed?
Yeah, so Raiders was definitely the first VR game. Obviously, I had developed previous sort of tests and stuff when we got the Oculus originally. So I met with Palmer and his co-founder before the Kickstarter got finalized, before they got the full funding, before they got bought by Facebook, back at Gamescom in Germany years and years ago. So it was a kind of a hotel room with this put together kit and trying that out for the first time. And we knew that VR was going to be big then, but I was still running my old studio and we were busy with our project at the time. And so didn't have a chance to do anything VR wise until this point, which is, we played hundreds of games of what was out there and sort of saw a gap in the market. And I still think there's a good gap in the market actually for Raiders or a game a bit like it.
And how was like designing a game for VR? How is it different in terms of like programming and game design and level design, and what are like all the things that you must have in mind when designing such a game when designing a VR experience, like like it's different than when you're designing a PC/console game.
Yeah, I mean, we've only got an hour today, but I think in terms of the challenges, there's certainly a lot of different things which have to be handled. The big thing we've found is that in normal games development, when you've done it for a few years, you kind of have an idea of what will fix a particular problem you're seeing, or will make something fun, or will improve a feature, and you'll kind of visualize it in your head, and you can imagine playing it. You can really sort of, hold the controller, I'll do this and it'll be fine, it'll play great. And 99% of the time, if you're experienced, you'll normally come up with something quite good. With VR, it tends to be that it doesn't work 50% of the time. So you end up with a lot more iteration because your expectations, whether it's through lack of experience in this area or because it's so experimental, or because the fact you have full 3D space to move in and you have a different sense of perception of the world around you, it's just very different. So I don't think that experience we necessarily have from the games background, other than the technical side, and obviously good visuals are and good design are. Designing specifically for VR has a whole new set of skills, which is why I think human interaction design, product design, architecture are actually quite interesting skills which can be applied to VR design, because you are literally building a place you can walk around and interact with. And so the length of people's arms and how tall they are, and how far away things are, and where buttons are placed, and how people interpret rooms and lighting in rooms and the position of doors or whatever, that stuff all kind of matters. Whereas in a traditional game, you can press a button and it will walk you to the door, or it will open the door for you, and all those kind of things. So there's certain things where as soon as you make an affordance that the character, the player can do something in a VR game, you then need to work out the implications of that to the rest of your game. And Jesse Shell of Shell Games talks about this a lot with their game I Expect You to Die, which is like a puzzle solving game, escape room-esque kind of thing. And they said that every time they introduce a new tool or item or object into the game, you have to think about the implications that has on everything else in the scene. Because if you introduce like a screwdriver, then any other screw you have which a screwdriver could be used on in the scene, players will expect to be able to use it on it. And therefore you have this exponential growth of implementation you need to do, and also puzzle evaluation, and just building new animations for it, or providing a reason that you can't do that particular thing. So yeah, it's exciting and challenging, but also does mean that it's harder to predict how long something's going to take. But at the same time, you can discover amazing things while you're doing it as well. So you can make great discoveries that spin off to be a new game entirely. And our Slack channel of ideas is very, very busy all the time, regardless of what we're working on, just because people try something, it doesn't work, but that's a great game in itself.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, later in our talk, we will. I would definitely like to discuss the side of of developing games and actually like the challenges of VR headsets and how the technology has changed since you started doing this. Cool, thanks,
yes,
Simon.
There's definitely some challenges with that we can get into. Yeah. So yeah, so this kind of next few slides are going to look a little bit about the technology side of things. So one big part behind all of it is our inverse kinematic system, so IK systems it tends to be referred to as. So this is quite an interesting challenge where we're looking to represent the various players, the humans who are playing the game or in the experience in a kind of representative way, which feels realistic without breaking the immersion for other people looking at you. And so what we have here is you can see the hands moving. There's a position on the hand or just on the wrist actually, and from that we can see the rest of the body, including the knees, the hips, the shoulders, all move accordingly to kind of act in a realistic manner. And the reason this is useful is because currently we only have 3 points of knowledge about where the user's position: the head from your headset, and your two hands, which are normally controllers or hand tracking potentially and other things. So you'll see a bit later that we've got an example using 5 trackers, which allow us to track more points than that. And this is a system, it's not a new technology by any means. Our implementation was a bit more performant in terms of didn't require as much processing power, so we could run more of them more often. But really this is a solution which is quite common, but we've applied it in a nice way to produce our avatars. And even then, when you've produced it, there's still some challenges with that. So ignoring the fairly rough character in this point, but on the right hand side you can see Chris, our animator, and what we'll do, we have a webcam set up on him while he's playing the mirror experience where he can see himself. And the reason for this is so he can see the results of his movement in real life with the controllers and how that maps to the 3D avatar representing him. So as I said, it's only tracking the headset and the 2 controllers. And you can see there that he's got his elbows at a certain point in real life and how it's matching across to the virtual version of him. And that's through him tweaking a very simple AI we have running alongside the IK system to produce a realistic avatar. And that's important just to represent the person there, because if it was the elbows were off in a really weird way, then it wouldn't be as believable, or it might be funny, but people wouldn't really be focused on believing that other character was another human there with them.
How much time did it take to develop your own, your proprietary animation system? How long was that in the making?
I mean, I think we still tweak stuff with it now, but maybe 3-4 months, I would think, for the initial version. Brian did a great job with that. And yeah, I mean, I think the tweaking of it and implementing of it sometimes is still a challenge, because obviously not all characters are going to be set up the same in terms of how you want them to react. You'll see in a second one of the systems we use to kind of cheat a little bit to really get a sense of what the player is intending to do, to sort of make it more realistic in certain situations as well. But yeah, probably about 3-4 months of the initial implementation, and alongside the other development work of Raiders, I think, at the time.
Cool. And have you come across any other issues when developing VR games that you plan to develop some plugins for?
Yeah, many. I think we've got a list of technology solutions which are as long as our games idea solutions. Yeah, so we have a couple, which one is volumetrics, which is a heat mapping technology. And so you may have seen websites where you can see like a heat map view of where people are looking and interacting with a certain website. So we have a 3D version of that, actually technically 4D because it tracks over time as well. And we cast a ray from the view that the players, or the direction the players looking in from their headset, and then collide that with the world, so you get a sense of what they're looking at as they're walking around and using the environment. And also we track the hands in the same way. So what do they interact with? So we expect the left hand to interact with the left-hand side of the panel on Spaceteam, but are they reaching around more often at certain points? Are they looking at the other players? Are they looking at the monitor? Are certain players not doing that? And obviously that's useful data for us to have. We don't have that enabled for the full game, which is out there for privacy reasons, but it's technology we can use during development to do some quite interesting stuff. And obviously for our enterprise customers, it's quite interesting as well. So if they're simulating a product, for instance, they can see, was this more comfortable? Were the people looking at the things we wanted them to look at? Did they pay attention to that thing? Obviously in training and education environments, you can check that someone was checking a certain, part of a procedure, for instance. Did they check to see that a button was switched on or off, from that kind of thing, just to make sure someone's paying attention. And then other technologies, we've got our own voice chat system as well. So we did find that the voice chat tools, or rather development kits out there, weren't really sufficient for our needs. So we developed quite a nice low latency voice chat, which we use today, which links to our lip sync and to everything else which we've got in there as well. So yeah, we've got a few more bits in development, optimization tools to make 3D assets run really nicely in VR, and some of the work we're doing for the new curators platform is quite interesting as well. So yeah, we always end up going back to the technology because that's our background, I guess. We can't help ourselves developing further stuff, and it's a little bit of a curse of technology programmers like ourselves, because we always will want things just to be perfect, and you have to resist not trying to fix everything, otherwise you never get the content created to show off what you want to do in the first place.
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy that you have a person in your team who isn't like a programmer and who's keeping you on track, who's following all these ideas on Slack. And
it's the other voice in head normally, to be honest, is that, like me saying, stop developing more stuff. But yeah, it's a balance, right? Because ultimately the technology you have is what determines what experience you can build, and it's an enabler. And so to a certain point, you just need the tool to be able to do the tool or the technology to be able to help you deliver that experience, whatever the goal of that experience is. And so I think we are very good at topping ourselves within where we need to on that. I wouldn't say we're always perfect, that we don't do too much sometimes. But yeah, I think normally we tend to get it right, that we try to develop and prototype things to the point they need to be done.
Cool. Yeah, we'll talk later about how you balance like all the things that are happening actually at the studio, since you have like a lot of your plate. It'll be cool to hear more about it. Cool. So let's get back to avatars and tweaking them.
Cool. So this is our research project we did with another team. So they wanted to do some full body tracking. And so for this, we used the Vive trackers, which was some little connectors you can build as you can put onto the user. So we have them strapped to the hips and onto your hip rather than onto your feet. In this example, you can see how we're tracking a full body. We also use the valve knuckle controllers, which track finger movement as well. And so that allowed us to be then tracking a full person using the same IK system. So rather than, as we saw before, the 3 points being tracked, we were actually tracking 2 feet, hip, hands. We did have the option of elbows, but didn't really need it because of our previous work, and the head position and the finger positions as well. So at that point, you were quite close to a reasonable motion capture system for representing people. So then the next step was the facial side of things. So we don't really have currently affordable eye tracking headsets. Obviously, there's a lot of good solutions out there, and a lot of the high-end headsets do have eye tracking, but eyes movement is very important to social engagement, and obviously that's a big part of social VR and social experiences. So we built a simple AI which was intended to simulate how someone might be looking around the environment. So in this example, you'll see how the character kind of is looking forward, these skeleton heads and hands. So we're not using the full body avatar system here. But it will look at the object being held. If it looks generally towards a person, then it will look at them, especially if they're speaking. It'll look at them in a way that they're paying attention to them. And also the character will automatically blink as they're quickly changing the direction they're looking and sort of reacting quite in realistic ways. It's quite a simple AI just driving the animation, but it works really, really well. And And yeah, forgive the awful Wolverine-esque model on this one. I don't know why we use that. I think because it was a quick one to add expressions to. But this was us adding some facial expressions in. Again, current technology, there are some headset add-ons you can get which track expressions, but with this example, and again, this is 3-4 years ago, we simply added a control to the joystick on the Oculus to be able to change between different expressions. So you can see them cycling through kind of sad and happy and worried and everything else. And so it's quite amusing because you can still apply the lip sync over the top of it. So you can be saying something really happy, but with a sad face or a worried face, which gives it quite a fun experience. But again, it's just layering up these different aspects. And what we did with Spaceteam, in case I forget to mention it later, because we know what kind of situation each player is in the game. So if the console's on fire, or if they're getting shot at, if things are going well for them, they've just succeeded at something, we automatically drive the facial expression for that person, which generally works quite well most of the time. So they'll be happy when things are going well, and they'll be panicked when things are going badly, and that reflects in their character as well as the fact that their spaceship panel's on fire. Cool. So this is another example from Chris, our animator. So we saw earlier him testing the elbow positions. This is quite an interesting example from Raiders where we've got a bow. So you can see that he's pulling the bowstring back, and you can see in this example his elbows facing down. So it's like quite low, whereas it'd be straight when you pull back the bow. So in that example with a different arm, he's got the AI enabled for one arm but not the other one. So you can see there what we're doing is we know that you're holding the bow, and therefore we enable the AI to hint to the elbow system that we need to make it point outwards. And so that results in the second example being much better. So there it's kind of down by his side like it would be if he was just normally holding his arms. But as soon as you see it on the other arm with it enabled, you get a much stronger draw when you've got that straight line going through the arrow. And again, it's kind of a simple system. It's just that layering of these different systems on top of each other, which works well. And then you end up with a kind of layered system. So we've got the thing there, the eyes looking around, the full body avatar. Even though the character's fairly poor, it's working quite well. Cool. So that was the kind of technologies that we developed in the various prototypes we've been building and research projects for other studios and clients. And then we brought all of that together, and Spaceteam was a game we'd loved for many years, even before we started the studio. We always felt that building cooperative games as we wanted to, that Spaceteam was kind of the ultimate couch co-op game. And so Henry's someone we reached out to probably before we even officially started the studio. So anyone not familiar, Spaceteam's an iOS and mobile game, free to download. I think it's something like 12 million probably downloads, something crazy like that right now. They did have a paid upgrade version in there as well, the Admirals Club, which allowed you to contribute and get additional features and everything else. There was a board game spin-off of it as well, and a catchy theme song. But basically the game is that you would be sat in the same space normally, or at least with the original version, over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and you'd have a series of tablets and mobiles all connected. Each person would have a control panel full of kind of techno babble, buttons and switches and levers to press, and they'd have an instruction at the top of the screen, and that instruction would either relate to their panel or to someone else's. And so you're shouting these random words and numbers at each other while trying to find the ones that have been shouted at you and press them and move them around. The panel controls can fall off and you have to fix them, and you can see the supernova sun kind of catching up with your spaceship, which is about to explode, and inevitably you always lose. It's just a case of how far you get through the sectors trying to escape the supernova. And yeah, a lot of fun, very collaborative, and quite simple in some mechanics, but was a great basis for what I wanted to do with Spaceteam VR. So I'm just going to show the, without sound I'm afraid, but I can talk over it a little bit maybe, the Spaceteam VR trailer we initially put out. So one of the things we wanted to get across is the variety of different avatars we have in there. So we have global avatars, we've got humans, outfits, sort of see some of the aspects of mobile version through the addition of things like where you actually so the slime there with the sponge is probably the nearest slime, but it's
Simon, just a quick heads up. Maybe you should mute your presentation because your sound has been breaking, and we actually weren't able to hear anything that you were telling us during the trailer.
Oh, okay. I don't think it was too important, so that's fine. I think you got across the point, but it's weird it did that. Maybe it was due to my noise cancelling software. It might have been trying to filter it out. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So I was basically just saying that we kind of brought across some aspects, and I'll touch on this again on the slides in a second. We brought across some aspects of the mobile in very physical ways, like the fire extinguisher and the slime wiping off and the button pressing, whereas things like fire extinguisher and the shooting the ray gun are very much new aspects we added. So from a history point of view, so 2012 was the original mobile version. We then reached out to Henry, and we'd been chatting for a while, but we licensed it in late 2016. We're doing some early prototyping alongside Raiders and a few client projects in the tech development, as we mentioned. It took us a while to get it signed. In fact, we actually funded it ourselves to start with because we still felt it was a great opportunity. Our predictions of when the numbers of VR headsets out there we draw a bit was kind of fairly good, and so we timed it quite nicely in terms of the release, eventual release. And then we were with Upload VR as part of the showcase in July 19, sort of announcing the developments. We then approved for Oculus Quest, and we got some funding from Oculus to release on the platform. And yeah, it was really well received. And obviously preparing for launch early 2020. COVID got in the way of our plans a little bit, and so we ended up releasing eventually in May. Our kind of plans for doing various events and everything around the world was a little bit challenged, but we were at PAX East just at the end of February before everything sort of started looking down, and we were part of their Omegathon on stage with 2 teams competing as part of a Spaceteam VR game, which was really cool. It's well worth watching the video of that because Spaceteam was previously featured as one of their Omegathon games, the mobile version, and they had a lot of problems getting it working. So there was a lot of pressure on us to make sure that the game worked. And I think we did actually have a bug on stage still, which was quite amusing, but worked eventually and a lot of fun instead. So this is just some early prototypes we've done. So here you can see on the top right some very basic control interactions. Again, it's kind of going alongside the other work we've been doing. Our grip systems and control systems, so just getting a sense of buttons that felt good, levers that were great and stuff. So this is, again, fairly early prototyping. Top left is more about the visual layout of a control panel around you, so that's getting a sense of that. So the actual final game ended up with just one panel in front of you rather than being wrapped around you. And that's as much an accessibility thing as it is to keep people focused on the other characters stood around the console as well, so you're able to look and see them, see what's going on with them, and also to be able to co-operative. In this version, it's actually quite high. People get an extra if it was actually that high in the full game. And then we have at the bottom here we have the. Sorry, can you hear me still? Okay. Oh, sorry, you muted again. Okay, so I can't hear you. Okay, so in terms of the elements we've brought across, as mentioned before, we have the base mechanics, obviously the instructions and the actions and everything else, and then we have the cooperation. Obviously, is a big part of it in terms of. So I was reading the chat, seeing what was going on with the meeting. Okay, was it okay in terms of hearing me?
Yeah, everything was perfect. Everything was perfect regarding the image and the sound. Yeah. No worries, Simon. Do continue.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just saw that there was something happening, and I was like, I just checked, see what was going on. Okay, cool. I'm just going to go back to that last video just really quickly then, just to show that last piece. So on the bottom, you'll see this is actually a multi-user test we had going on, where you'll see 2 characters. It's very early multi-user testing. I'll just show that. You can see people waving there at the bottom. And that, yeah, that's just the early test. So I just wanted to show that that was an early prototype of the multi-user side of things. So we'd established that the controls worked. We established the multi-user side of things. We kind of done the layout testing in terms of how the console, the table, and the controls and the people need to be set out. We've actually got a picture of the team sat around our kitchen area with chairs and tables, trying different configurations, trying to get a sense of what works well when you're interacting with others over that kind of distance. Because as mentioned before, you are physically kind of stood in that layout. So the elements we brought across on the mobile, as I touched on, the base mechanics of receiving an instruction, which is either for you or for someone else. That's the kind of main interaction we brought across. The cooperation element of that, the humor which you get from the instructions you're giving, the techno babble and everything else. That sort of comes across, and then we added a lot more in terms of humor influences on there as well. So whether that's, you know, the whales flying around, or the slimes that throwing slime around, or that everybody needs to dance at once, or everyone has to freeze, or things going on with your tools and things, or the air horn and the random sounds and animal noises it makes when you're in the middle of a panic situation. All that kind of randomness just kind of adds to that original feel, which Henry and the original design captured really well. And in terms of the different modes we added, so we have, just to further complicate things on top of making an online VR game, we also added the face-to-face mode. So this is the ability to have an iOS or Android or any kind of web device, really smart device, connect to one or more VR kits at the same time. So one player needs to run the game on a VR headset, but then people connect to that game on mobile devices and play alongside. And the mobile game they get to play is quite similar to the original, not exactly the same because it's web-based and links to ours, but it's quite fun because it means that you don't need to have 6 headsets in the house to be able to play a game together.
Yeah, that's cool. It really makes the game much more accessible, because still, like, okay, VR headsets aren't as expensive as they were, but like still aren't that affordable and that widespread.
Absolutely, yes. So that was really important for us. And then we also added a practice mode in there as well, which is effectively single player with 2 robots. And obviously that's not, it loses some of the original fun, but we've actually had a lot of people say they really enjoyed just being able to mess around in that environment as well. And the robots are quite cute, and their interactions and the animations that they play. And so we've certainly found that useful as well. And I think there's definitely a younger audience we have who enjoy the practice mode as well as face-to-face. So we sort of see that there's a lot of people will log in and just play face-to-face games. Whereas online VR is sometimes a challenge to get enough players around to always be able to play. And I think that from our point of view, that really increases the value proposition we had to users, because you know, multiplayer always has that challenge of how many users are wants to play if you don't have an existing friend or play group to jump on with. So in terms of elements we've added, obviously the avatars, the aliens, the robots that are playable as well. That gives a sort of, not maybe personalization, but it's just an ownership of your character. It's quite nice in there. The remote play, the fact that you can play it remotely. We had people coming up to us at PAX and EGX events and saying how awesome it was that the game that they've loved and played, and they always play with when they're together with friends, they can now play in VR. And we sold a lot of headsets, we think, by people saying that they wanted to play this game, and Spaceteam was a game that was going to get them to buy a headset. So the voice chat obviously is a big part of that. We have random debris, which is just thrown at you occasionally, and controls you press will affect the environment around you. So for instance, there's a button which is like ship wiper, and there's a windscreen wiper goes on outside the ship, or eject debris, and the debris will get thrown out at you and get all over your console and everything else. Obviously the physicality of actually hammering stuff and shooting aliens and grabbing different tools and everything else. The game is playable with just one hand in use, so obviously there is some accessibility issues with VR still, but it's very important to us to make sure we considered that. Likewise, we've sort of colour blindness as well. We're very careful to avoid sort of requiring people to scan colours successfully. And then cross-platform play. So obviously this is a big challenge, but we wanted to do cross-platform VR headsets as well as the mobile and tablets. So we support Steam versus Oculus versus Vive ports. So that's PC and standalone headsets. We're coming to some further headsets in the future. So we announced the PlayStation VR versions very soon. And yeah, lots of exciting things still going on in that area. So in terms of difficulty, so yeah, I think there's a few challenges. So ultimately VR, we don't know who the players, or rather the players don't necessarily know the people they're playing with. So it was important for us to get across the game mechanics to people quickly, and I don't know if we did that always successfully. The practice mode does introduce the game, but sometimes we have had people jump into a quick play game straight away and try to figure the game out with others. But the fact you can chat to each other, and if there's an experienced player in there, they'll generally help each other out, which we've seen again happen in other VR social experiences as well. But it's one of those things where you can't necessarily always know what a player's experience level is when they start. And we are working from a point of people are new to the medium. Like with a PlayStation game or PC game, people know how a mouse and keyboard game works, or they know how a game controller works. But sometimes in VR, you can be the first game that a person tried. And in that sense, you're having to introduce them to concepts which we see as established as VR developers and VR gamers for several years, but they may not.
What are your predictions like regarding the actually, yeah, when do you think will be that moment, like in the future, when VR is as widespread as like PC and console? Like when will I have like when will I like have an Oculus as well as my like PlayStation 5? When will that happen, Simon?
Exactly on the specific date, I'm not sure, but I think it's interesting where we're heading. You know, ultimately, there's a price friction, there's a content friction. Right now, the COVID pandemic has fast-forwarded adoption of multi-user technology a lot. It's adopted a lot of VR technology, or accelerated that adoption as well, whether that's for enterprise usage or for people feeling lonely and wanting to do something, or even just for entertainment by themselves. You know, if you've been through all of Netflix and you've been through all of PlayStation games you've got, and you're looking for something different in terms of experience, then you know, Oculus Quest right now is the most affordable way to access that. And you know, with PlayStation 5 and Xbox selling out and not available, and PC GPUs being very expensive right now, it was a very affordable option. So I think we've seen a big acceleration of that, and hopefully that then means that we get more investment into software, which means we get more people being attracted to the platform because of the choice of content they have. Plus, you know, the increased uptake by enterprise means that people may get given a headset for business use, and that means therefore they've got something to then use in their spare time. And I think we just gradually see that. Obviously, Facebook for some people is a challenge in terms of them being the people who are currently leading in this area. We're going to see new people enter very soon. I think there's been rumours about some very big tech companies recently, and I think that kind of thing we'll see further acceleration, and then pricing models will start to change. So I mean, we all remember with subscriptions on the mobile phones, for instance, you know, how that led to widespread adoption of smartphones, going from a big upfront cost to be more spread out cost. And if you think about advertising and sponsorship based ways of paying for a headset, and what they could do with that, that's really interesting. Obviously, people will have privacy and advertising sort of concerns, but ultimately it's intended to be useful to the person. And I think that will drive a lot of adoption. So I think the reason that hasn't happened sooner is because they probably can't make enough of them fast enough right now. I think there actually is a supply problem. That's not me knowing anything. I just believe that that's why they're still charging what they are. I think if they could create as many as they wanted, they could probably push the button and lower the price even further, or go for free, to be honest. I think that's inevitable at some point in the next few generations, and that's probably where we're going to head, even if the technology is not exactly perfect or the content is exactly what people want yet. That's definitely where we're going in terms of adoption.
Cool. And you mentioned how people, yeah, especially during 2020, have been turning to VR headsets, like on the technology side or on the investor side. Like, how has it accelerated its development, and also like how has like COVID affected your studio in terms of having time to dedicate and to respond like quickly to this new demand?
Yes, I mean it was interesting for us because you know, we had a bit of a negative impact at first, which we kind of expected because one of our clients is quite large, and you know, they are linked to the economy. But after that, then things really switched to be more positive, you know, because we kind of moved the team from being in office to working remotely. We could meet up with each other face to face in Spaceteam and see each other every day for testing and wave at each other and hang out. And that sort of physical body presence you get from being in social VR was really nice. So because we knew each other anyway, you do project that person onto that social avatar, even if they do look like an alien with a Santa hat on and funny glasses. It still is that person. So yeah, I think we adapted quite well as a studio. Obviously, we've got a lot of you know, big PC hardware we needed to get to people's houses because the development work we do isn't necessarily stuff you can easily do on a laptop, for instance. It tends to be a VR specific machine. But other than that kind of basic stuff, we've been in a really positive position. Like our investors are very excited for the acceleration of adoption, as I mentioned. The fact that we're already working with different verticals, not just gaming. And obviously gaming did really well in this time, and we've seen a lot of merger and acquisition activity for VR companies and multi-user game companies, and we're kind of bridging those two areas from a games point of view, and the technology which goes with that as well. So yeah, kind of exciting for us, while being sad that we can't go to the pub for a drink with each other after work.
You said earlier that you were you mentioned like going to E3 and how you missed travels, but the time for that will come.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, let's hear more about let's hear more about the project and how you and the techniques of developing it, of translating a mobile game into a VR experience.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly been a challenge. So the important thing for us was really getting the positive and negative feedback to the user. So we experimented quite a lot with this. So I think in the VR version, the mobile version, you do have the direct response of the person sat next to you who can also see the same controls, and they can look over to an inexperienced player's device and see what they've done right or wrong, and give you that direct feedback. Whereas with VR, we have separated people a bit more, and people aren't likely to engage with each other necessarily if they don't know each other already. And so it was important we gave more feedback to the individual user, even if they were playing in a multi-user game, that they've done the right thing or they've done the wrong thing. And so we looked at various things like just ticks floating up, or more sound effects, more haptics and everything linked to that. And so it wasn't a hugely complex thing. It was just something where when we were user testing it, we found that people weren't necessarily getting it the first time. We do see a lot of people sometimes can fail the first game they play, and then they realize, this control means this, or this instruction was for someone else. So we did do a lot of work on that area. The initial sectors, so the first few levels in the game, we go by very quickly, and we made them as simple as possible. So we dynamically, procedurally rather, generate all of the controls and all of the instructions you're given, so we can make things really, really simple on the easy games. So it's maybe you've got 2 buttons at first, and even if you just kind of press the 2 of them, you'd eventually figure out what you're doing. And worst case scenario, they'll set on fire, and you can work out how your fire extinguisher works by putting it out and then the hammer to fix and repair them. So we really give people a lot of time in the first few sectors of the easy game to sense what the monitor's about, what the controls are about, because as always, people don't tend to do the tutorial, even if you try and force them through it. People need to learn within the game. And I guess the practice mode kind of tied into that. So again, the robots can sort of replicate the idea of other people shouting at you, or of either you shouting at them. And we did explore what we might be able to do in terms of voice recognition and other things, but obviously it's still a developing area where we're still interested in that area potentially of further work with practice mode and using the robots. But I think that was an area where we wanted to be able to test out new ideas in a simpler way, and I think the practice single player mode was good for that. And then the talking points and events around the ship was a new thing we added. So Because again, you're not there in the physical world with people, you're in this virtual spaceship we've created around the game. The humorous aspect of the other robots that fly around and fix stuff. So if a fire sets off in the back of the ship because you've done something wrong, a robot will go over and put it out, or it might run off because an alien's appeared, or you might shoot it with a ray gun and it reacts to that as well. So those kind of extra bits of environment interaction and humor really added a lot as well. And then some of the elements we added later in the game. So we've got some crazy kind of word mix-up and letter mix-up ones, or we drop the vowels out of instructions and things like that. There's some really quite difficult game modes and game difficulty bits at the end. So tweaking those was a really nice way to enhance the game for people who are familiar with Spaceteam, but also to challenge them as well.
Cool.
And so in terms of, sorry, go on.
No, I was wondering, like, are there any other games that you would like to remake in VR, like whether it's like a AAA game or an indie game?
Well, I mean, I guess with Raid as a Bird, the one reference point would be Gauntlet, I guess, would be quite a nice one in terms of classics. I was thinking back to the Ideas channel again. There's literally hundreds of games we'd love to remake in VR. I wouldn't say remaking in VR is necessarily the easiest thing. I think Spaceteam's an interesting one because of the fact that we're effectively taking what is a flat panel of your mobile device, and we're then transposing that onto this 3D panel in front of you. And so in effect, we're recreating that sat in the lounge playing it on a tablet to being in a spaceship and being on the panel in front of you. We're not actually doing much in terms of reconfiguring what's going on there, and we don't have to deal with locomotion challenges, moving around the environment and all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a simpler one to pick, while there are challenges to what we've developed. It's definitely on the easier side. Raid as a Bird certainly has some of the more difficult challenges in terms of what we've done there. If you took any kind of role-playing game and what we've done with that. It's a really good question, actually. I'm not sure. There's loads of games that I love.
In a perfect world.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've always tended to make what we wanted to do. Like some game studios and games developers get sort of pigeonholed into what their genre is and everything else. But, you know, over the years, we've literally made everything from football games to hockey to, you know, my co-founder Brian was on Perfect Dark on the N64, was, you know, the big game that he worked on. So that was, you know, obviously a classic first-person shooter game. So, you know, Harry Potter was another one he worked on. So it's kind of, we've done a huge range of many titles over the years. I think it's ultimately just about stuff we enjoy and really using the medium and device for something that's fun. So I think social is the big aspect of it. So anything we do create would have to be cooperative. Some of the new ideas we've got are very much around that still, in terms of, and not just because of COVID, I think, but because we think it's genuinely a fun way to play. The thing we have found, though, is that enabling others with other devices, like our face-to-face mode, I think that's still important. So as much as, you know, we obviously love VR and we're very passionate about it and think it is the future, I think there is this transition period we're in now where we need to enable people from all platforms and all screen types and device types to interact. And obviously we're seeing that with, you know, massive games like Fortnite and everything else that you can play on most devices. Ultimately, we do believe that VR is the best way to play it because of the immersion and the controls and the presence you get. But enabling others to be there with you is a good thing, I think. So yeah, that's a bit of a cop-out answer that I haven't specified exact games, but yeah, watch this space in terms of the stuff we're doing, I guess.
Yeah, and how did the players react to Spaceteams? Yeah,
so we have very good response. So I mean, again, as I mentioned, you know, events we're going to, people who are fans of Spaceteam would run over to the booth, jumping up and down, really excited the fact we brought the game to VR. Really positive response from early players. I think we've had a bit of a negative response from people who haven't found as many people online when they want to play. Like, we know we have active users at certain times and we do a lot of work to make sure that they're around, but ultimately multiplayer games always suffer with, if there's not that many concurrent users around to play, then there won't be a game for them at that time. And obviously that's why we introduced the face-to-face mode and the practice mode. And we're still doing work on that area as well. So we hope that the PlayStation VR version and some other modes and changes and tweaks we're doing to the game will increase the number of players and help those people who haven't been able to find games online. But yeah, from people who got to play it and been in game or enjoyed a face-to-face game or been online with people in VR, they've loved it. So that's been really positive and reaffirming of what we wanted to do with it. Cool. So I was just going to cover what we're working on next. But obviously, if there's any questions about Spaceteam, we can still go into those. So as I hinted at, more multi-user games, VR and flat or pancake or whatever you want to call non-VR games. We're very keen on that. We've got a couple of really exciting ones we've been pitching and been prototyping. We'll be hopefully doing some of that this year, as well as the further Spaceteam work. And then mentioned at the start, curators. So this is it's a social platform for people to meet regardless of device. So this is people in headset, people on phones, people on tablet, PC, through the web, to visit virtual museums, arts and heritage sites together. So we're working with a couple of museums already to bring their digital content, whether that's a replica of an existing physical building, into VR or into the device, and meet up with others to have live tour guides in there. So a guide from the museum or a curator or a celebrity who's a fan of the museum or the particular piece of art could be in there at a certain time for you to meet and to talk to ask questions of, or you can just explore it by yourself or with your friends and just hang out as a place to enjoy different cultures, different heritage, learn some things, obviously had educational benefits as well. And this is all just taking all of those technologies I kind of mentioned before, the voice chat, the avatars, the asset optimization systems and everything else, and putting it into one place. So very much a different use case, but the same technology and beliefs underneath it. Cool. And that's it from the slides point of view, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
I was curious to learn, actually, how do you manage as a studio to juggle so many different projects? So on one side, you are still like developing this animation system. Right now, you mentioned this curators platform. You're making your own games. You're dipping toes into advertising and other industries other than gaming. Like, how do you balance it? Like, how do you manage to get everything on time and like to prioritize?
Yeah, not sleeping is definitely one of the things from my point of view. But yeah, it's a challenge. But I think the different opportunities always, cross-pollinate ideas and bring up new opportunities as well. So we've seen a real benefit from doing a mix of different things over the years. And ultimately, as I mentioned before, the technology does drive the content. So we kind of developing them hand in hand. We don't stop development on a piece of content on a game to develop some technology to go with it. The game is the platform that tests out and helps us iterate with that piece of technology. So it's very much hand in hand. And it may be that technology's got a use case across all of our projects, but we'll start in one place where it's most important, where it's needed the most at that point, prove it in that scenario, and then consider how it works for the other projects as well. And from our point of view, I think we've always worked with several projects at once. Like my old studio, Ford or Lemon, we had 3 projects always at once, a mix of own IP and work for hire, and some technology stuff as well. And I think it's just what we enjoy, that you get that variety. We prefer having smaller teams on projects rather than massive teams. I think I've only ever grown a studio to 40 people before, and I think that's kind of quite a nice size. We've got up to sort of 15 people on each project, sort of maximum. Everyone gets to have their input on the project to a really important degree, and feel like they've made influence the product and the game or design or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's just picking the right projects and the right timelines and the right priorities for our clients or for where we see the market at. So, we've definitely not in the last year shipped things perfectly on time because of COVID and other stuff. We've been trying to alleviate pressure on the team in terms of mental health and everything else, because that's important to us, is, making sure the team's happy. So that's the one area that we will bend on if we need to. Like, we don't mind, making sure that the team is the priority first, and then the products and everything else we develop is secondary, because ultimately we're just trying to make games and experiences for people. We're not curing anything.
Got it. And Simon, like for the end of our talk, like, what advice would you give to up and coming VR developers or people just looking into like starting a career in VR?
Awesome. Yeah. So in terms of the VR side of things, I would say it's to experience as much as possible. There's a huge amount of content out there now, not just paid, but with side quests and other things like that, you can download and try out a lot of different experimental stuff being built. Just really immerse yourself in the platform and the medium to understand it, because if you're starting in that point from a VR point of view and sort of native in that language and that design language first, then I think you'll be in a strong position for really creating good stuff there. In terms of general development, obviously Unity, Unreal, and several other engines are available for free to download and to try. Great tutorials online via YouTube and via their own websites as well. There's some great forums in terms of how to get started, and most of them come with templates just to quickly create a project and try something. So you can literally, build something in Unity or Unreal and try it on your headset within 10, 15 minutes. So I think the time to build something is just really minimal to try something out and test it and just keep working at it, which is awesome to see now, because it used to be a lot longer than that process, and to access that information so quickly, and the people who are able to do this professionally and to help you, it's all out there. So yeah, I do that, and just use those free resources, and if you can afford to, then buy a few books which seem recommended in that area as well, and just learn and absorb stuff basically.
Awesome. Simon, thank you so much for your talk, for sharing your experience, and for sharing this much advice to our audiences. We'll make sure to try out Spaceteams and leave honest reviews.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure. And to all of you listening, please make sure to tune in on 24th of February for a talk with Ellie Rainsbury. They are our composer, sound artist, and audio designer who are specializing in music and sounds for games, animated, interactive, and interdisciplinary works. And in this talk, they will explore all that can affect the creation of music and sounds, and unpick the creative challenges they've met along the way. We're really looking forward to our next Salon, and until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.